I just want to read out a beautiful passage that's available on your website, lablitarc.com. A story is not like a road to follow. It's more like a house. You go inside, you stay there for a while, wandering back and forth and settling where you like, and discovering how the room and corridors relate to each other, how the world outside is altered by being viewed from these windows. And you, the visitor, the reader, are altered as well by being in this enclosed space, whether it is ample and easy or full of crooked turns, or sparsely or opulently furnished. You can go back again and again, and the house, the story, always contains more than you saw the last time. It also has a sturdy sense of itself being built out of its own necessity, not just to shelter or beguile you. Wow, it's a beautiful piece of writing, that. But it's just, it's a really revolutionary kind of an idea. Do you feel that looking at stories or literature in the sense through the eyes of, or through the tools of architecture, and you being an architect, do you feel that, once again, going back to perspective, this creates different perspectives, this adds meaning to what otherwise would just be words on a page? How does that relationship work in your head?
I don't know. I don't know, in the sense that there are many, maybe one does see. I've done this workshop in many places in the world, not only in Europe, in the US, in Taiwan, in Jerusalem, Dubai, and with people who have nothing to do with architecture, zero comparative literature or writing, or lawyers, or with architects, and it's like going backwards. This is not an experiment that puts two things together. Yes, it inverts something, and what it inverts is that, I think, when we focus on a product in terms of creativity, we try then to emulate something, because if the product works and I do something similar, maybe by symbiosis I have followed the path that is creative. But here we go backwards. What could be a space that could generate the story? We do a process that is exactly inverse. The amazing quote you read before is by Alice Munro. She's a writer. She's not an architect. And she explains that stories are houses. And the same experience we have with reading the same text, the same words, 5, 10, 20 years later, the physiological experience is totally different. Where we saw maybe darkness when we were teenagers, now we see the clarity, so light, because it puts clarity into something that now we have a different relationship with. When I went to see the Pantheon, and it was early 20s, I had never seen it before. I'd studied it, architecture. It looked gigantic, and the emptiness inside pulled my neck upwards. When I went back in my 30s, and I'd been in New York for many, many years, it felt different. It was the same place, the same bricks. There is objectively the same thing, as there is objectively the same book. But as Alice Munro says, every time you go back, you see yourself different. You see the world through the windows, she said. So imagine, for our project, the windows in a story are how, by reading a text, a poem, as you said, but also literature and essays and journalism, you see yourself physiologically different. You see the world in a different way. When you are enlightened by something that is happening in the world that you didn't know about, or you hadn't seen it from that perspective, the world looks different. And so the consequence that you were referring to before, it could be gigantic, and I don't know which it could be, because when I see the participants, the workshop, that at the beginning cannot go anywhere, after the first day being with high school kids, I've done it with high school kids who finally see architecture not as a discipline. I'm not an architect, so I can't comment on this. Disappears, because once you're inside a story by Amy Hempel or Ernest Hemingway, you are on the other side, and you weigh the weight of the characters, of their dialogue, or something that is about to happen, how it weighs on you. You don't do it with words. Thoughts have shapes before they have content. We are obsessed with content and words that we attach to ideas that we have. There are moments in our lives when we have thoughts that are just forms, instincts, and we rush to putting words attached to them all around.
The brain
and
gets in the way.
Yeah, gets in the way, and the language gets in the way. The brain,
Yeah.
I think, is much freer
Yeah.
than we pretend it to be. So the laboratory acts at a moment by inverting everything, and you say you have how does the decision in Hills Like White Elephant of doing the surgery weighs on the dialogue? How much does it weigh? You can actually build that way according to your experience. If you're 16 and or 35 and you're a man or a woman, or you live in the Western world or in Asia, that way I think is different, or you depict it in a different way. And I think it's like a gigantic, like a volcano. There is a gigantic amount of creativity pressed underneath us that we don't have access to, because we are just readers. The creators are the ones who write stories or build architecture. But without us going through the space of building and recreating in our mind or reading a book, there isn't a product of creativity. We create it.